Well, hello, everyone. I'm letting folks into the meeting. Thank you for your patience. We had an executive session beforehand. I'm trying to let folks in. I am not able to get board book up, so I can't see the agenda. And I didn't print it before I left the office. So I may ask some folks for a little guidance on who to let in and when. So we're getting set up here. When the executive session ended, I asked them to give me 5 minutes to let folks in. So, hi, and thank you for your patience.
Thanks, Pamela.
So Pam Shields, I think I'm gonna make you a co-host so you can help me let folks in. How about that? Is that all right with you?
Yes, absolutely.
I don't want to leave anyone out. And I have a long list here. We've got a fair number of people who are attending. So Director Curry, I'm trying to find your phone number. Which one are you?
It's the one that ends in 089.
Thank you.
And I'm trying to help, but I'm having difficulty making it work.
There you go.
I am officially unmuted. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It looks like I was just asked to unmute, but this is James. I'm still in attendees, I think.
Oh, okay.
I moved you.
Thank you.
Anyway, I think I moved you.
And I'm looking for our auditor. There you are, Tracy. I will let you in with our auditing firm.
If somebody makes me a co-host, I can help too.
Okay. And I may have let too many people in for the beginning, but I'm at the beginning. I mentioned that I can't see the agenda. It is being emailed to me by Denise. Thank you very much. And I have it.
Do we have all the board members on? Let's see, David, Claudia, Shields. Curry here, I think so. Okay. All right, so I will call this meeting to order at 6:41. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this evening's school board meeting. Our first item on the agenda is the board chair election, 1.1. So what we're going to be doing, as it's been stated in past, Director Curry had to step down from board chair. And now we are on the search for a new board chair. So I would like to open up the floor for nominations on
Vice Chair Fuller, I'm sorry to interrupt you. If you could call for a motion to approve the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nope.
That wasn't on there and I got confused. My apologies. So yes, I asked for a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Awesome.
Who was that?
That was Director
Curry.
And do we have
Second.
a second it? Okay, Director Shields, all in favor?
Aye.
Yay. All opposed, all abstained. Motion passes, and that motion was unanimous. All right. So actually, okay, yeah, we'll go back to 1.1 board chair elections. So I would like to open the floor for nominations.
I nominate Director Solowski for board chair.
All right, we have one.
This is Director Curry.
That was Director Curry. All right. And then we have Director Andrews. You raise your hand.
Yes, I'd like to nominate Director Shields.
Perfect. So we have Director Solowski that's been nominated and Director Shields that have been nominated. Please, is there any more nominations? Not seeing any. Please, we'll start with Director Solowski. Please state on if you are taking on this nomination and why you are running for board chair if you are.
I will accept the nomination. Thank you very much. I think that one of the things that I'm really hoping to change is the mindset from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. And I think that when we, as a school board, really come from a place of let's see all the problems and fix the problems, we're going to get stuck in dealing with problems. And if we can come to and start with an abundance mindset saying, hey, this is what we have. These are the people that we have. What can we do with what we have? It really kind of changes the outcome. And so, yeah, I think that I would like to really see the board move into the future and beyond a lot of the problems of the past and really kind of open it up to a new relationship.
Perfect. Thank you. Director Shields.
Many of you know me, and I've been serving the board now for 10 years. And it would be my honor to continue to serve for the rest of this particular term for the 21-22 term. A lot of things that are, we've got new board members, and I think my experience in leadership would be helpful in shaping where we're going. Director Solowski states it well in terms of a mindset. I'd like to see my opportunity to continue for the next maybe 6 months and then move forward from there as just a member of the board.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, and everyone has spoken their piece, I would like to request a motion to move to a vote for board chair.
So moved.
Second it?
Second.
All right. With that being said, let's vote for who we have. So starting with Solowski, I believe, I hope I'm praying God to say that right. But starting with Solowski, let's see how many votes we have for her. So let's see, please raise your hand if you are voting for Solowski.
I can't raise my hand, but I'm voting for Director Solowski.
Awesome. Let's see. And then, okay, 1, 2. Okay, cool. So that is 5, right? I think I said that. Yeah, that's right. 5. Okay. So that's 5 for Slawski. And then how many do we have for Shields? Director Shields. 1, 2. Awesome. So with that being said, we have Director Slawski as our board chair. Congratulations.
Congratulations,
Thank you.
Chair Slawski.
Thank you. I move to let the vice chair continue with the running of this meeting as they have prepared for it.
I second the motion.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay. With that being said, it looks like it's unanimous for our board secretary. With that, and we will go forward, moving down to introduction of guests. 2.1, we have Tracy Jones, our compliance manager from Polly Rogers CPA, and I will pass that on to Superintendent Owens for the introduction.
Great, thank you. And it's my pleasure to go ahead and pass it over to Director Southerton to facilitate our introduction.
Thank you, Superintendent Owens and Vice Chair Fuller. So this evening we have Tracy Jones, Compliance Manager with Polly Rogers CPAs with us this evening. You'll recall that Polly Rogers is the independent outside auditor for Centennial School District. And Tracy will be presenting this evening on the results of our 2020-2021 annual comprehensive financial audit results. And Tracy, I believe we're going to go into reports for the audit results right after the boundary report according to the agenda.
Awesome. Thank you for that lovely introduction. So the next one we have is approval of minutes, and it is February 9th, 2022's minutes for the board meeting. Please, is there a motion? If folks don't have any problems with this, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
So moved.
All right, so we have a we have a first by Director Curry, seconded by Chair Slawski. All in favor, say aye.
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 Perfect. That is unanimous. Board Secretary Jordan. And then we will go on and move on to public forum. And I did not receive anything from about public forum. Is that correct?
You are correct. I did not forward you the statements that were sent in. I will get them to you as quickly as I can. You will need to move on to the next item.
Awesome, thank you. So we will go on to reports, and we will start with 5.1, the comprehensive boundary adjustment presentation. And I will hand it off to Superintendent Owens.
Great, thank you. It is my pleasure to introduce this boundary review recommendation to you this evening. This recommendation is reflective of considerable effort on the part of many, and this has taken place over the better part of the past year. Joining me tonight is Kent Martin and McKay Larrabee with Flow Analytics, and they have been with us before to provide board updates on the boundary review committee process. I'm also pleased to welcome 2 of our parent representatives from the committee, Jennifer Riedel, who's a parent of a Park Lane 1st, 3rd, and 5th grader, and Rebecca Congdon, who is a parent of Powell Butte 2nd and 5th graders, as well as a 7th grader at Centennial Virtual Academy. Director Southerton and Chief Swenson have been project leads for this process, and they're here to add any necessary comments. And just in terms of process, during the report section of our agenda this evening, we're going to go into detail about the boundary review recommendation. And then during the new business section of the agenda, the board will have the opportunity to take action on the recommendation. As we go through the report, if you have questions, feel free to interject to ask. So let me get my screens set up so that I can display this properly for you. All right. Will you give me a thumb up if you can see the presentation on the screen?
James, there's like a little bit of one of your extra
Thank you.
windows. You bet. All clear now.
Thank you. Navigating a newer computer to me. All right. So this has been a 9-month process beginning in May of 2021 with the initial project planning with district leadership, developing and administering community feedback surveys to inform the process from August until September of 2021. And for the boundary committee process from October of this fall to this January, all leading to tonight's recommendation presentation to the board. Many thanks to the dedicated committee members and district leaders, which include parent representatives, school principals, district administrators, and other staff supporting the process. I also want to offer appreciation to the Centennial community for their feedback through our open houses and also through surveys. I'll let Rebecca and Jen offer their thoughts specifically around committee process step number 3, which you'll see on this chart that's projected.
Thank you, James. From my perspective as a parent, my experience with Centennial as a school district has been solely through the elementary school so far, up until my 7th grader started middle school this year. My kiddos have been at Powell Butte since my oldest was in 1st grade, and we're very, very happy with our school and proud to be at Powell Butte because of how connected the staff are and just the nurturing environment there. And the idea of a boundary review was really scary for us because the thought of moving to a whole new, community was had a lot of just unknowns. Like, would the environment be as caring? What would that change be like for my kids? And being a part of the committee as a parent, it was wonderful to see the principals from all of the schools be a part of the conversation and see them interact over the values that the committee was focused on. And it really strengthened my pride in the district as a whole. And it gave me a lot of confidence and comfort that regardless of where the lines fell for our family, just seeing the caliber of the professionals in the district, being willing to have the conversations around these values was just really reassuring. So that was a great experience for me as a parent.
My name is Jen Riedel, and I have 3 students that are at Park Lane. So like Rebecca, I also just have experience with elementary school thus far, but my oldest will be in middle school next year. I feel really good about the process too. I feel like as a committee, we were able to listen to and discuss feedback that we received about potential change areas and then talk about what to do with those changes. For example, there was discussion around changing a boundary between Park Lane and Patrick Lynch that we ultimately decided to reconsider after we received feedback from the first open house. And as parents on the committee, we were able to get to know each other and know parents from other schools and see each other's perspectives and understand why we would want to consider certain changes and also why we needed to be really careful about the decisions that we were making. We also received a lot of positive feedback through the process, and we believe that people felt heard through the process.
Thank you. Community engagement has been a critical component of this process, and we wanted to take a moment to illustrate the various methods that we have that have been used, including monthly articles in the superintendent's update, the boundary review webpage, automated messaging, regular social media posts, the fall 2021 report to the community, a community survey, communications from the school level, and the 2 open houses that were held to vet the boundary review committee's consensus scenario. I'll let Chief Swenson add any additional comments she might have about the engagement efforts with the community.
Good evening, everyone. And so early this past summer, we put together an extensive communications plan to make sure that we were reaching every resident in our community, that parents had the information that they needed as well as staff to participate in the process throughout, and just those regular updates. And so you see here this very comprehensive effort, as well as we were using data to track how our reach was getting out there to our staff, parents, and community. And so, like I said, it was a very broad-based, intentional, and extensive communications effort to make sure that our families, staff, and community were well informed and also knew how to participate.
Thank you. The left side of this slide illustrates the committee's charge, which I won't read to you, but in addition to what's listed, I will add that the comprehensive boundary review was intended to address imbalanced enrollment throughout elementary schools and at the middle school in the district, the need to balance K-5 enrollment within the physical capacity of the existing school buildings district-wide, development on the south end of the district impacting enrollment, and informing and supporting the conversion up to 6 K-5 elementary schools and 2 6-8 middle schools, with the conversion of Oliver Elementary to a middle school starting in the 22-23 school year. With respect to the guiding principles on the right side of the slide, Rebecca will speak briefly to the factors the committee considered, and Jen will talk about the criteria that the committee used.
As James mentioned, one of the things that we were looking at is school capacity. We also looked at feeder patterns. So the conversation of whether to have dedicated feeder schools from the elementary into the 2 different middle schools, or to split up elementary schools, you know, either direction. We also looked at student body composition, as far as socioeconomic and diversity factors and special ed populations. And then we looked at neighborhood proximity, lots of conversations about whether kids would be going to school with kids that they played with in their neighborhoods, and where lines might impact that.
As far as the criteria, we had parents from every school on the committee, including the current middle school and the high school, providing a district-wide perspective. You'll see in the recommendation that we were able to balance enrollment pretty effectively, including across the 2 middle schools. We considered socioeconomic indicators and transportation factors, including how long students spend on the bus. We used major roads as boundaries in multiple instances, trying to keep students from having to cross them, particularly Powell Boulevard. And we looked at demographics as we worked to balance free and reduced lunch, special education, ELL, and racial and ethnic diversity across the schools.
And this slide is a really great visualization of the work that we did throughout the process. The Boundary Review Committee developed and vetted against the board approved guiding principles over 30 different scenarios during the 7 different workshops that we did together. And for each scenario, they created a static map with the summary statistics for us to review and discuss. And the statistics were sent out to each of us like in PDF, so that we had them to review and flip through during those conversations, and just see what the suggestions we made, how they impacted the different factors and criteria that we were looking at.
This slide shows a breakdown of the feedback that we received from the 2 open houses. One took place in November, the other was in January. We had responses predominantly in English, but there were opportunities for speakers of other languages to provide feedback as well. Most of the responses were from parents, but we also had staff input and a few community members who submitted responses. At both open houses, we received actionable feedback, which we discussed in subsequent committee meetings. We were pleased with the feedback that we received, as most of the participation was online due to the pandemic. And much of the feedback was also positive and appreciation for the work of the committee as well.
And I would just add, if I could, good evening, members of the board. Just a little perspective from Flow in terms of looking at total responses. We do a lot of these processes, and for a district the size of Centennial, this is a lot of responses. Even though you may think it doesn't look like it's a lot of responses, it really is. We've had some projects where we get 40 responses total. So 139 actual survey responses to an open house is a very large number. The other thing too that you saw a few slides back is that there were 1,000 views of the website, of the webpage for the boundary review around the first open house, and about 1,500 for the second open house. And that's a lot of hits. So folks were paying attention to the process, and there was certainly a lot of positive feedback as well.
And as far as the language is concerned, so for the first open house, we had Spanish and Russian interpreters at our in-person and open house for the first open house. And we also had translated videos so that our parents could and staff could watch them from home if they wanted to at their convenience. And so we made sure that we had translated videos for both open house 1 and 2. For open house 2, it was great. We had some additional languages that parents that had requested interpretation. So we offered some interpretation in Spanish, Arabic, Burmese, and Somali. And again, videos and feedback forms were offered in English, Spanish, and Russian for both open houses. And also, we paid attention to technology access as well. And so one thing that we let parents know is that if they needed assistance with technology or needed some support in, filling out the form, that we were able to provide that support as well. So thinking about all those different aspects to make sure that we removed any barriers for our parents to provide the important input to the process.
This slide is a couple charts kind of representing the, on the left, respondents from each of the different schools. And you can see that we had responses from every school in the district. And at each open house, we had responses from each elementary school, middle school, high school, and the virtual academy. And as we mentioned previously, there were a lot of really positive comments and neutral comments that took up about just under half of the comments we received. And then the amount of actual actional input was about 7%. And we reviewed all of the comments and really focused on comments that we could take action on. And one thing that the feedback showed us as well was it helped us develop some FAQs to help strengthen our communication. And that really speaks to why we think there were fewer comments during the second open house, because there were some specific questions that were addressed in that FAQ. And these statistics are made up of a combination of the responses from both open house presentations in November and January.
So this map represents the committee recommendation, and shown here with the recommended K-5 boundaries in the color block and the change areas that are numbered. This was a months-long process and commitment to develop this scenario, reflecting 30 previous scenarios, utilizing the guiding principles and incorporating feedback from our community through the open house process. This recommendation attempts to balance the elementary school capacities, K-5 in this new paradigm, by adjusting the committee consensus scenario number 1 presented at the first open house to provide smoother lines using natural or artificial boundaries, and uses Powell and 162nd as boundaries, as you might note. I'll take a moment to orient you to the key in the middle column of the slide. Elementary boundaries are reflected by the maroon-ish, well, I don't know how it looks on yours, but the maroon lines. Middle school boundaries are reflected by blue lines, and you'll see where change area number 1 is. Right above that you'll see that blue line that runs through from left to right, and that reflects the middle school boundaries between Centennial Middle School and Oliver Middle School. The change areas are noted by the numbered areas that have the cross hatching in them. And the boundaries for the 6 elementary schools are reflected by the various colors that represent each school. So you can see the different colors that are on the chart, and then you can use the key to figure out which school that reflects. The map also reflects that the committee used Powell as a clear dividing area, which was the impetus of the movements of 3 of the change areas, number 2, number 3, and number 5, just south of Powell. With respect to the change areas 7 and 8, the committee was trying to balance the student counts and also the demographics between the 2 schools of Butler Creek and Pleasant Valley. Also, as I previously mentioned, there's a middle school boundary that was created here in blue, and we don't currently have a middle school boundary because we have 1 middle school. Finally, based upon the second open house, there was 1 change made, and that affected 3 households in change area number 7, which improved transportation access to those particular households. Jen and Rebecca will speak to some of the additional change areas.
I can share about change area 1, which is to the left of the map on the west side of the district. That piece that's south of Division, the blue line there where the middle school division is Division. And so that area south right now attends Park Lane and Oliver Elementary. And that area is being moved to Powell Butte Elementary in this scenario. And the reason for doing that was partly to use Division as a boundary because it's a major street, but also to reduce the number of students at Park Lane. Combining Oliver Elementary and Park Lane Elementary puts Park Lane way over capacity. So that's to bring the numbers down a bit at Park Lane.
And then one of the impacts that had moving area 1 into Powell Butte was that Powell Butte was way over capacity. And so south of Powell, we had to do some shuffling between Pleasant Valley and Butler Creek. And so a lot of those decisions had to do with balancing some of the demographic numbers, and then as well as looking at how those things impacted transportation and the way some of those neighborhoods are laid out. So those are some examples of those changes that look a little random south of Powell. There was a lot of thought put into those in conversation.
So we'll leave it here for a moment, just in case the board has any questions about what they're seeing, because this is kind of the meat of the presentation as far as the actual adjustments that are being made. I'll also offer that Director Shields and Hardin were involved as committee participants. So if there's anything that they would like to offer in terms of any of the thought process or any other things that they'd like to offer, you're welcome to do that as well.
Perfect. Is there any questions? Yes, Chair Slosky.
Yeah, I just want to confirm what I'm seeing here is that no one is going to have to cross Powell. Is that correct? To walk to school if they're walking to school?
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Any other questions? Comments?
Chair Solowski, I would just clarify that no elementary students will. The middle school and high school obviously will.
Yeah.
Great.
That was my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. This map shows the same recommended boundaries, this time featuring the middle school feeders. As you'll note, there are 4 feeders to Centennial Middle School and 2 feeders for Oliver Middle School. It's important to note that the capacities are different between the 2 schools. The physical capacity of Oliver is almost half of the physical capacity of Centennial Middle School. Oliver's physical capacity is 570, while Centennial Middle School is 1,000. Due to the physical capacity limitations, it's not possible to evenly distribute students into each middle school. In their recommendation, the committee felt strongly about maintaining feeder systems that do not divide elementary schools. There were concerns about the amount of geographical space that Butler Creek and Pleasant Valley boundaries take up, and it's important to note that they are more sparsely populated, particularly Pleasant Valley's boundaries. The committee looked at 4 to 5 east to west scenarios instead of north-south, which is reflected in the committee recommendation. To maintain elementary school capacity, that never worked out. The map shows the middle school boundary line with the committee recommendation. The scenario was recommended for the boundaries for Patrick Lynch and Park Lane, feeding into Oliver Middle School, and that's in the bright red boundary line with the remaining 4 elementary schools, Butler Creek, Meadows, Pleasant Valley, and Powell Butte, feeding into Centennial Middle School. Once again, keep in mind middle school boundary line must be established as Oliver Elementary School will be converted from an elementary to a 6-8 middle school in 2022. Both middle schools will include 6th grade students within their enrollment in fall 2022, which is not currently the case.
So as a committee, these are the charts that we talked about throughout the process as we were developing different versions of the boundary lines. And the labels in the color coding, the green are showing when the capacity was hitting 65 to 85% of utilization. And the yellow highlighted areas are over 50%. When we started out, there were lots of red, like over 85%. And it's hard to get green in every cell, but in 5 to 10 years, even with the projected growth in different parts of the district, you're seeing more green, you're seeing more of that balance that's still below 85%. And we also needed to balance not just elementary school enrollment, but as well as like the middle school enrollment and capacity as well.
As you can see, there's quite a few numbers on this slide, and perhaps you've had the chance to review this information in advance of this report. What I will say is that these demographic figures served as a continual reference point for the committee as they developed the various scenarios. One thing you'll notice is in the second chart that the free and reduced lunch percentage for Park Lane and Powell Butte are essentially 100%. This is due to the community eligibility provisions, or CEP, which provides federal reimbursement for schools over certain percentages of free and reduced price meals. Therefore, the figure for those schools reflect that all students receive free meals and that they don't necessarily individually qualify, if that makes sense. Also, on the top chart, you'll notice that some schools are underutilized in this model. And as was pointed out, this changes over time in the 5 to 10 year projections, and we'll speak to that a little bit more in later slides. The final thing that I'll add is that this is a new paradigm, and therefore we can't compare the existing reality to the new dynamic. That would essentially be an apples to oranges comparison. Also, as was mentioned earlier, with respect to the middle schools, there are different building capacities that we have to take into account.
So in totality, this slide shows the recommendation that the committee shared with Superintendent Owens on January 18th, which was our final boundary committee meeting. And the committee members did vote unanimously in favor of this boundary recommendation.
When reviewing the box that shows the final vote total, it's important to point out that while only parents and guardians were authorized for the final vote, there were many other content specialists from the district that provided input and guidance throughout the process. And this recommendation represents a huge commitment and hard work for the volunteer parents and guardians on the committee, as well as our board liaisons as well. At the last committee meeting, when the recommendation was presented, we took notes as to the pros and cons, which we are considering not as cons, but other opportunities. And so I'll just read the ones that are listed on the left side of the slide. So the pros of the recommendation were transportation and walkability, especially the consideration of Powell, Division, and 162nd. Neighborhood consideration of keeping neighborhoods together, keeping true elementary school feeders to middle school, keeping capacity fairly balanced considering geography, and maintains breathability and socioeconomic status numbers. Neighborhood middle school with Oliver Middle School, keeping middle school students within walking distance, and keeping clean boundary lines that help reduce confusion and have the boundaries make sense. Other opportunities that we saw where building utilization could be more balanced, but that also could conflict with some of the other priorities like neighborhood schools and walkability. Providing equitable programming and supports based on socioeconomic indicators and special populations. That will be something as a district that we'll want to make sure that we're keeping our eye on as we implement programming between the schools. And then opportunity for celebrations and transitioning to newer communities. We have the opportunity to orient students in the change areas and students who are coming from 5th and 6th grade to the middle school level next year to those new schools. And so parent, guardian, groups and administrators ensuring that newcomers to those schools are feeling welcomed. And those were the opportunities that were identified and reflected. As you will remember, in January, we engaged the board with the concept of a transition plan. As you will recall, the question was to the degree to which the transition should be facilitated in the fall of 2022 or to be delayed, and if delayed, to what degree. The board consensus at that point was to move forward with the transition and focus energy and attention on orienting students to their new school, utilizing the existing intra-district transfer process to facilitate any request to stay at a student's current school. And then I'll read the strengths and drawbacks specifically with that transition recommendation that we had talked about. So the strength in using the intra-district process is it factors in the building capacity. We can accomplish school staffing much sooner, which we have a plan ready to go right away. And it's more manageable based on an existing district process. The drawbacks, not everybody's going to get their choice, unfortunately. And it may compete against the goal of balancing enrollment. And then if students are approved for an intra-district transfer, families must provide their own transportation for those who are approved to stay at the existing school. Finally, the transition plan to welcome students to their new school includes, but is not limited to, the following elements. Centennial Middle School and Oliver Middle School principals will plan to present to current 5th and 6th grade students and their families to provide information about preparing for middle school. The families impacted by the boundary change will be notified and they'll be supported. Resources will be developed for each elementary school and middle school, introducing students and their families to their new school. That includes videos, school profile, updated boundary review map that will be prepared. Also, our technology department is supporting the enrollment and registration updates to reflect the attendance areas for the 22-23 school year. As you can imagine, there's a lot of back-end elements that we need to take into account in terms of reflecting these new changes in our existing systems. So that concludes our review recommendation. Thank you so much for the assist from our parent representatives, Rebecca and Jennifer, helping out with the presentation, as well as all of the committee participants who were involved in this process. And we welcome any questions or comments that the board might have at this time.
Thank you, Superintendent Owens. All right. Do we have any questions, board members, comments, questions? Yes, Director Harden.
I just wanted to thank the community for being involved in the process, for your participation in the open house and, you know, checking out the map online. And then I wanted to just a real heartfelt thank you to the parents and community members that served on the committee. Thank you very much for your engagement. It makes all the difference in the world having your voices be heard. And, you know, it really means a lot. So thank you all very much.
Awesome. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, yes, I would like to piggyback off of Director Harden. Thank you to everyone who was engaged in this process. It's wonderful to see this come to fruition and see how we can get this moving in the transition period. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So the next one is our, and I believe that's the end of that. So 5.2 is our next line item. We have the annual audit report by Tracy Jones, compliance manager, Polly Rogers, CPA.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. Okay, well, thank you for inviting us to your board meeting. We really do appreciate it. I am not your auditor. Paul is aware that I'm filling in for Brad. Brad is your auditor. So he does a great job. He did a thorough job. And so I'm here representing Brad and Polly Rogers. So thank you again for inviting me. Does everybody have a copy of the board packet or the board letter per se in front of you?
I don't recall seeing that in my email anyway.
Okay. Okay.
Jordan, Pam, is there anything that you were supposed to send to us?
I didn't receive anything.
Okay.
So
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I'll just kind of go through the highlights then. I won't refer to go to page 1 of 5 or anything like that. So I'll just go through the highlights. So basically the purpose of the audit is to identify and opine on a fair representation of the basic financial statements that the school district has. And so during the 2020-21 fiscal year. So what we look for is to make sure that the school district is adhering to generally accepted accounting principles and auditing standards throughout the fiscal year. We want to make sure that the school is adhering to the Oregon Municipal Audit Law and related administrative rules. And in addition to federal, state, and other agency rules and regulations related to expenditures for any federal awards. So we're happy to present is the results of the audit. Basically says that you were given an unmodified opinion on the basic financial statements. This means you were given a clean opinion. No significant deficiencies, no material weaknesses. It was a clean audit, which is good. It's a good place to be. So good job. Everybody did a really good job. So we really appreciate it. We like giving clean opinions. Next thing is we want to make sure that the school adheres to state minimum standards. And we did. We found no exceptions or required a comment on adhering to state minimum standards. So good job on that. We found that everything that we tested, you did adhere to state minimum standards. This is the next item is probably the biggest thing is a management letter. We did not issue a management letter. If we had issued a management letter, that rises to that we found significant deficiencies or material weaknesses. We did not, which is good. When a management letter is issued, the school district would have to write a letter to the state of Oregon saying how you're going to address those issues. We did not find any of those, so good job. That's a good place to be. apparently there was a single audit. There was a single audit this year. Correct, Paul, if I'm understanding correctly. Okay, so there's a single audit, and we found no issues and of non-compliance, no issues of question costs. So basically, everything was good. Everything across the board was good. We tested, internal controls. We tested, expenditures that were allowed. Everything was great. Next item is, and this is going to be kind of this is going to change a little bit of your financial statements that you're going to see during the 21-22 fiscal year, is GASB is wanting all municipalities to implement GASB 87. GASB 87 as leases. And so you're going to start seeing your leases being presented differently on your financial statements. So Paul, that's something that Brad's going to work with you on. I don't know if you guys have already started working on that, but that's going to be one emphasis that we're going to be really working on this year. So
yeah, we've started the conversation, so we'll be happy to make that change.
Okay, good. So just wanted to make the board aware of it. You're going to see that next year's financial statement. So that's all I have to report. Does anybody have any questions?
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions? Comments?
Vice Chair Fuller, I'd just like to note that I apologize. I thought I forwarded that letter to the board previously. I did just send it to Pam, so we will be able to get that out to all board members promptly. And the audit results, as always, are posted to our website and available for the public.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Chair Slosky.
I just want to give a shout out and to our finance department and Director Southernton's team. Great work. It's wonderful to hear such good things coming from the audit.
Yes, I agree. We really appreciate it. Makes our job so much easier, Paul. You have no idea.
Well, I think Chair Solowski said it appropriately. It is the team, and we have an amazing, wonderful team. I said that since day one when I arrived. I was very happy to have some well-tenured, seasoned employees in the business office that do an excellent job. So makes it easier with everything that's going on. So thank you for that shout out to the whole business office team. They work really, really hard, and I know they'll appreciate that.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, with that, somebody's power just went down. Oh, I think that was Pam. Jordan's power just went down. So just let you give you a heads up. Love technology. Oh no. So she is out. Okay.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
I just picked up the recording. We'll see how that goes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so then with that being said, we're going to go on to Superintendent's report. Superintendent Owens.
Have a great rest of your meeting.
Thanks so much.
All
Thank
right.
you, Tracy.
Thank you. Good night.
All right, given the other reports and topics on the agenda, I will keep this superintendent's report brief and focused on just a couple of topics. The first of which is interest-based bargaining with the Centennial Education Association. Today was our first bargaining session with CEA, which was conducted over Zoom and facilitated by Janet Gilman with the Employee Relations Board. Today, the teams finalized our ground rules, which includes logistics, communication, process, and behavioral agreements for bargaining. We also exchanged our list of bargaining topics. The second topic is adjustments to COVID-19 layered mitigation strategies starting March 1st. As the COVID-19 pandemic moves into its next phase, we're preparing to make changes to our safety protocols in response to declining cases and high vaccination rates in Multnomah County. With case numbers that had peaked in Multnomah County because of the Omicron variant now projected to decline even further in the coming weeks and months, we expect shifts in guidance from public health experts. For that reason, we will be making the following shifts starting on or before March 1st. We will return decision-making to buildings as to whether meetings are held in person or virtually. Schools will need to take into consideration the size of the group and the space available to allow for at least 6 feet of spacing between adults. Extracurricular activities such as after-school clubs will be a site-based decision as to whether these activities will be held in person or virtually. Outdoor masking on campuses will become optional, including for PE and other classroom activities. School dances and other in-person school events may resume, sort of like we have the prom turned spring dance that's coming up, and a health and safety plan incorporating mitigation practices at the time of the event is required for all events. Building use by community groups and individuals during non-school hours may be approved for indoor use. The users will be required to follow all health and safety practices, as well as complete vaccine attestation forms in compliance with the state mandate. In addition to these changes, the district is currently developing a plan for the resumption of visitors and volunteers inside buildings to begin after spring break. As far as overnight field trips, the administration and board are considering these on a case-by-case basis. And in fact, you have a couple of requests to consider this evening. All of these changes are in alignment with the current Multnomah County Public Health Guidelines and the statewide Ready School Safe Learners Resiliency Framework for the 21-22 school year, updated most recently on February 9th. Finally, the topic of masks indoors is still pending. East County superintendents met with Multnomah County Public Health last Tuesday, February 15th. They let us know that they would be providing schools with a recommendation here in the near future. In addition, we are awaiting the update of the Ready School Safe Learners Resiliency Framework, reflective of the upcoming March 31st timeframe for transitioning indoor masking requirements to local district control. Our plan is to gather this information and develop a recommendation to share with the board at our March meeting on March 9th. I welcome any questions or comments you may have on these topics, and that concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you, Superintendent Owens. Do we have any questions or comments on Superintendent Owens' report? Not seeing any. All right. I would like to move back up to public comment. We do our public forum. We do have a couple of public comments that have been sent to me, and I just wanted to make sure that they were heard. Rod Ludgren, he's an employee. He wants the board to consider using tile for the upgrade pool as part of the bond. And then we also had 9 parents with district submitted the exact same comments through the One Click Politics website. And they're asking that masking be optional starting March 31st, which that is good. With that being said, making sure that we we're able to hear those comments. I also want to go down to the next item that we have, which is confirmation items. And I want to see if we have a motion to confirm these items. Do I hear any?
So moved.
Okay, we have a first motion by Director Andrews, seconded by Director Harden. Awesome. Discussions, questions, comments? Not seeing any? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Awesome, and that is unanimous. So then we are going.
I think we lost Director Curry, so.
Yes, it is. We did lose him. He's not feeling well and had to take a leave.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So the next one that we have is 7.1 old business. 7.1.1 return to in-person board meetings discussion. So yes, the time has come to us to reunite in person. And so we need to decide when we would like to hold those in-person meetings again. I will say, knowing that, the mask being optional by the 31st. I don't think it would kill us to wait one more month, but that's totally my preference. But would love to also hear what the thoughts from the rest of the board on where we should or what date would make sense to come back to in-person meetings. Yes, Director Andrews.
Don't we just have one more meeting before spring break? We have one more board meeting, right?
Right.
Yes.
So I think your suggestion, Vice Chair Fuller, of waiting until another month, basically after spring break, would be appropriate. Give us enough time to plan and figure out where we're going to hold the meeting, and just have one more virtual meeting and then go to in-person from then on.
You also have a training, by the way, just so you know. So you actually will be meeting twice, but only for one official board meeting.
Yeah, but that's already planned to be virtual, right? I mean, our trainer would be remote, so I didn't really consider that as part of the number of meetings that we have.
Yes, you're right.
Awesome. Director Shields.
There. The question, and Claudia, I think you sort of alluded to it. The boardroom is really small. And so I've seen in-person board meetings where it is the board members and the administrators, but no audience. And then of course there's been the board meetings that, of old, almost 2 years ago, where audience, there was an audience in the room. So I don't know when we're going to have that discussion about the transition, because when we say in-person meetings, again, it kind of lends it to what had been the old standard, which is, meet and everybody walks through the door at 6:30. Does that mean public is going to be welcome into the room as well when it's a little room? Or are we going to be considering in-person in a bigger room for distancing purposes, et cetera? So just a question for consideration.
I agree, Director Shields. That's one of the questions that I was going to actually to bring up as well too. I personally don't have a problem with maybe traveling between schools. That way other folks can also be able to, join and speak, and then sort of bring that community, bridge that gap between community and board member meetings. But that is something that we would have to discuss and figure out how that would go with Superintendent Owens and the rest of the building staff that's at these particular schools as well too. Director Lynn.
Yeah, I'd like to get back in person too, although I would, it's kind of a new world where I'd definitely like to make sure that we're ready for the kind of hybrid type meetings for both board members and for the members of public, and that we are 100% ready to go on that so that everybody who can attend can, because a lot of people have gotten accustomed to just hopping on their computer and a Zoom meeting. And then the other thing I just want, not tonight, I just want to hear before we go back in person, more detailed plans about disruptions to potential meetings and about how they are going to be absolutely planned for. And then absolutely, if there is disruptions, that we have plans that those people are held accountable to the utmost that they can be.
Thank you. Oh my God, Chair Slawski.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fuller. When I got to do a tour, one of the things that I noticed was that the board room has been updated with all sorts of fancy computers and screens. So I think there is the ability to go virtual. I do think that it would be great to see some kind of hybrid where maybe we're all in person and then people that wish to join or comment can do so virtually. And I think that, the only I like the idea of going around to different schools, but I do know that the boardroom was set up so that people could potentially join virtually. And I don't know if that is similar at all of the schools. And then my last question is, having not been part of this, is there any type of security or the SRO officer? Have we, I think waiting until after a decision on masks is going to help us keep any uprisings that could occur to happen. But just curious about that as well.
That's a very good question. And then I also know that we also have Director Shields that has a question as well too. So before we go through all of those and start figuring out and deciphering that, I want to make sure we get Director Shields' question on the table too.
A lot of that is addressed in the policy that we'll be reviewing tonight, because we have legal requirements that we are now bound to. But the challenge is going to be whenever we have tried to move board meetings to other locations, it tends to be confusing because people are like horse to a barn. They know where to go. And so that's been a challenge. It's also been a challenge with setup. And now with the new requirement based on our public comment at board meetings policy that we're reviewing tonight, that makes it almost more important for us to be in an environment where that equipment resides. So we know that the boardroom has been brought into compliance with that new law. And so even though it sounds good to move around, it might be a lot of challenge for our staff to be able to do that with the requirements, the legal requirements for public comment, et cetera. But we can discuss that probably in more detail in our first read of the policy that we're going to be talking about tonight as well.
And then we have Board Secretary Jordan.
I'll just briefly share. I worked at PPS, and there are lots of disruptions by the community at PPS board meetings, or there had been in public before the pandemic. And they always had their security person. They had a full-time security person on staff who was at the board meetings and was able to usher people out, along with, I don't know if it was an SRO or a office. It was a police officer. I'm not sure if it was one of the SROs, but they would escort people out who were too disruptive. And if there were too many people, they would just stop the meeting. They just shut it down. So I'm just sharing that information with you, having come from a much larger district.
Thank you. Superintendent Owens.
Yeah, I would just offer, based on the comment that was just made in the comment that Chair Selesky had made as well, is our past practice has been to have our internal high school security at board meetings when we felt like that's been needed. And I believe that there has been one time in the past when we had a board meeting at the high school where we had an SRO or a Gresham police officer who was present based on a specific request for that meeting. So all of that is to say that that's something that the board can consider in terms of frequency, how often that happens, and then to what degree of security presence we feel is necessary. And then as a district administration, we can help facilitate that.
Awesome. These are really good. Thank you guys for bringing up these very important issues that we need to discuss on how to get back to transfer back in to in-person. I also see that Pamela Jordan, your hand's up again. Or not. Okay.
I forgot to take it down. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. No problem. All right. With that being said, do we want to I guess what are this is maybe a question for Superintendent Owens, what are the next steps that you need from us to get the ball rolling on this?
Yeah, what I would say is a couple of things. Number one is time. What I just feel like I heard was after spring break, aim for the first meeting in April, and then just where the location is. And I'll let Director Southerton speak to the portability of our technology. But to Chair Slawski's point, we have the boardroom set up to facilitate meeting the requirements of the policy that we'll read tonight. In terms of public engagement while we're in physical session. If we were to be in the boardroom, the recommendation would be that it is the board and cabinet members who are physically present, and then the individuals who are participating in the audience would do so virtually, and we would have a setup similar to what we have here, set up in the boardroom so that people could engage just as they are now, but in the virtual setting while others are physically present who are conducting and involved in the meeting. If we were to do that at buildings, I'd have to let Director Southerton speak to the portability and accessibility aspects.
Thank you, Superintendent Owens. We do have the capability to support board meetings occurring outside of the boardroom at other district facilities. So that was part of the charge that the board gave us back in December when looking to implement this new law, was that the boardroom was the preferred location and we should invest in technology for the boardroom. But we should also be mindful that the board may want to return sooner than before the pandemic has ended, or while there's still concerns about distances. And you would like us to be able to support you in larger spaces such as a gymnasium or a cafeteria. And so we do have a portable system that we're prepared to support the board should they wish to return in that setting rather than the boardroom. I will say it is a good system that will meet all the needs and fulfill the responsibilities under the law. It is not as high of quality system as the boardroom is, right? That's our permanent solution, and that's where we put more resources. So it might not be something you'd want to do on a regular basis, but it might be something that we could certainly do for 6 to 10 meetings as we're getting back to, in person and wanting to still take precaution and be distanced. So we're ready to support you. I would appreciate 2 to 3 weeks of notice, because we will need to request some assistance from our staff, our IT staff, and they will need to be present for the board meeting. We do want to have a technician there available for all board meetings in case there's a technology issue. So just in courtesy to them for adjusting their schedule, it would be helpful if we had some kind of notice we could provide them when you wanted to return in person.
As far as a recommendation from the administration, if I was to offer one, it might be to start in the boardroom and get our legs under us in terms of having the board meetings in physical session with those accessibilities, and then take the show on the road when we feel it's appropriate.
Thank you. With that being said, do we want to just come to the consensus that we will work towards, we'll have our last couple of meetings virtually, and then work towards having our first in-person meeting in April. We will have it in the boardroom if everyone feels comfortable, especially since it seems like that's where a lot of the equipment is best situated for as of right now. And then we will go from there. How does that sound? Awesome.
April 13th, I think, is the first meeting.
Okay.
In April. So I think let's go live.
Awesome. Director Harden?
Sorry, hit the wrong button.
No problem. Okay, so with that being said, we are done with old business, on to new business. We have 7.21 boundary recommendation, Superintendent Owens.
All right, so you saw the report that was offered by the Boundary Review Committee participants. And so what you have before you is the board note that properly reflects the recommendation, as well as the presentation that reflects the actual boundary shifts, which is what you would be voting on the recommendation for the administration to implement. So with that, I recommend that the board adopt the attached boundary review adjustment recommendation.
All right, do we have a motion?
I'll move to adopt it.
Whoa, okay.
Boundary review.
All right, so we have Director Lynn who motioned, and then we have Director Harden, who I saw his hand up, seconded. Any questions, discussions, comments? I don't see any. With that being said, all in favor, say aye.
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 That is unanimous. And we now have a new boundary. Yay. All right. So 7.2.2 CHS drama team field trip request. Principal Scott Agrari.
Directors, thank you. Every year except last year, I guess in 2020, we've had 2 years that we've missed it. Our drama group goes to the State Drama Festival, and it's an overnight field trip. This year, they would be sending 4 students. Vaccinations are required by the organization in order to participate, so all students and chaperones need to be fully vaccinated. It would only be 4 students participating this year. When she wrote it originally, there was a range, but 4 would be that. There are 2 chaperones. They stay at a hotel it's within half a block of the theater that they do their events at. So they can walk once they're there. That's just walk across the plaza. I don't know if you have any other questions. I would encourage you to permit them to take part in this because it's a meaningful, they have lessened numbers and they've split some things that would usually be larger groups in order to keep group sizes small for the event for the Oregon State Thespian Conference. So those are the basics.
Thank you. Is there any questions or comments? If
I move
not,
to approve the field trip.
sorry, say that again, Director Lynn.
I move to approve the field trip.
Second. Oh, is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Yay. Okay. So a motion to approve the field trip by Director Lynn, seconded by Chair Solowski. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Awesome. And that is a unanimous vote. I can't wait to hear and all about their field trip. I love drama. The next one is CHS MESD Close-Up Foundation field trip. Again, Principal Scott Agrari.
Yes, we have, this is through MESD's Migrant Ed, that 2 of our students are going, they're eligible to go for the Close-Up Foundation field trip with MESD. So the MESD Migrant Ed are the chaperones. 2 of our students were chosen to participate in this. We've had Close-Up at CHS in the past. This one is not specifically a CHS Close-Up field trip. It's the Migrant Ed Close-Up field trip, but it's through the organization Close-Up. Everyone, once again, must be vaccinated in order to fully vaccinated in order to participate in this field trip, including chaperones. And they'll be going with students from other schools in the application. There's 6 students going from Multnomah County, 2 from Centennial, and the other 4 come from Gresham, Barlow, and Reynolds High School. And the itineraries are attached, and even some of the things, like if somebody did get COVID, they've got plans for that too, like what they would need to do in order to quarantine in Washington, D.C. while they were there.
That's wonderful. Way to be strategic. Awesome. Is there any questions, comments, concerns on this matter? And if so, is there a motion to approve this field trip?
Make a motion to approve the CHS Close-Up field trip.
Second that.
Awesome. So we have a motion to approve the CHS close-up field trip. Seconded by, motion by Director Harden, seconded by Director Lynn. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right, so that was unanimous. With that being said, we will go down to our last agenda item of tonight, which is, well, not last, but a couple, but 7.2.4. It's the first reading of policy BDDH. It's public comment at board meetings. Superintendent Owens.
Great. So this policy is before you actually for the third time, but we've decided as a board to take this back to a first read and exercise our first policy committee. And so we had the opportunity last week for Directors Lynn and Director Shields to meet with me and go through. We spent about an hour and a half working through the policy and the AR. And so I offer that to say, as we're going through, even though my name is the one reflected, Director Shields and Director Lynn will likely be interjecting as well in terms of some of the thought process, in terms of how the policy selection of the different customizations were made. So with that being said, it might be best if I shared screen and walked us through the different elements so that you know what we're looking at. So one of the concerns previously, and I'll try to size this. I think I might need to use this key to get it more precise. Let me try to get a little bit bigger for us. Does this show adequately enough? Okay, thank you. So one of the concerns was just so much struck through language existed here, and was that struck through language picked up elsewhere in the policy? And that was one of the things as we went through that we wanted to make sure was done. And I think, correct me if I'm off, Director Shields or Director Lynn, one of the things we kind of checked for was a lot of this information was struck out where it is, but then was picked up later in the policy to an adequate extent. And so I'll just kind of advance us to the second page of the policy where it pertains to the procedures for oral public comment. So what you'll see here is that there is the procedure. Whatever is listed in gray highlight is added language. Whatever is struck through is what OSBA struck through. And then, as has previously been noted, and I will point out in section 2 here, if there's brackets around language, it is because OSBA is allowing some choice in terms of what the procedure will read. And so what we decided on this public comment procedure for number 2 was a person wishing to provide public comment, if an opportunity is provided by the board during a meeting open to the public, will do so prior to the board meeting as directed. And so that's different than a precise procedure because that might change. And so the idea there is that we would just prescribe what that procedure is going to be. Most likely it would be the white card format that we've done before, but we just talked earlier tonight about doing a hybrid format. So it may not be that we want to do the white card because that may not work. It may need to be that we need to do a virtual form instead, sort of like we're doing presently. So there may be different ways in which we direct. And so we wanted to provide us the flexibility to change that without having it be prescriptive in the policy, if that makes sense. I'll allow Director Shield or Director Lynn to add any comment regarding that, if they choose.
Just one thing, when as board members, as we're looking at what's in our packet, we're looking at the version that doesn't have all those track changes and has the choices that Superintendent Owens is going through with us. So if you're looking at your copy and the copy on the screen, that's why you're going to see those differences. But the version you have is just accepting the striked out stuff that you see on this, that is in red and struck through on the screen.
Good call. Yeah, when a board book originally posted, it was posted with the version that you're mentioning, Director Shields, and then sometime on Saturday, I think we updated it with this just so that the board members would have more clarity as far as what choice making had taken place. So I don't know if you printed yours previously. Yeah, there you go. So then you've got portion number 3, and I don't know if, you know, if we're slow walking too slowly and you just want to kind of move this forward, let me know, but in lack of comment, I'll just continue here. Another choice that was made was with respect to section 5 here. A person giving public comment is limited to an established time limit. And what was usual in the policy is of 3 minutes. And so we wanted to provide the board the flexibility to establish that time limit and not have it prescribed in policy how long that is. We did say in the AR that would generally be 2 to 3 minutes, but that would really be to the board and specifically the board chair's discretion as far as how much a lot of time would be provided for public comment. Statements should be brief and concise. Time limits will be determined based on the number of commenters and the time available for public comment. If a person has more comments than time allows or is unable to comment due to time constraints, the person is encouraged to submit additional written comments through the district office as directed. Then you see some choices here in terms of the board will not hear public comment during board work sessions, and topics raised during the public comment portion may be considered for inclusion as agenda items at future board meetings. Finally, you'll see the procedures for written comment. Members of the public may submit written comments to the board at any time at the district office, by mail or email to the board account. Materials or comments submitted at least 48 hours in advance. The recommended by OSBA was 72. For us, we chose 48. Our current practice is really 24, but we're wanting to provide flexibility, at least in the policy, to be able to have that done on Monday afternoon, Monday at the close of business as our policy deadline. And if the administration is able to get that information to you in a quicker turnaround, so be it, but 48 hours is what was recommended for board consideration there. Another piece that's there says that the board comments will be read at a board meeting, will not be read at the board meeting, but will be acknowledged. So that was one piece we wanted to make sure to point out as well. Then I will transition us to the AR, which I will make bigger as well. And one thing I'll say before we kind of dive into this is the board will want to decide before we go into in-person format if you're offering verbal comment, because currently you're not. You're offering written comment that you're summarizing. So that is just something that you'll want to consider before we go into physical session as well. Trying to get this in a way that doesn't look fuzzy. Sorry for the back and forth. Basically, this is outlining a lot of what was there in the previous policy, but it gets a little bit more specific around the time frame. As I'd mentioned, generally the time frame for public comment will be 2 to 3 minutes. The time limits will be determined by the number of commenters and the time available for comment. The board chair will have the discretion to determine the order of the public comments. That is one thing that we put in the proposed policy, but what I will offer, and not to confuse things too much, but what I will offer is we turned our policy committee work around to OSBA, specifically to the policy specialist, Rick Stuckey. His advice was not to have the board chair will have the discretion to determine the order of public comments. So that might be something that board wants to discuss tonight, because there's a perception of favoritism in terms of how the board chair orders the comments that may be perceived if the board chair does that. Otherwise, the default would be the comments are read in the order in which they're received, or they're given in the order received. So I just wanted you to know that was something that the policy committee worked on, but we were advised differently. And so the board will want to think about that piece. This gets a little bit more specific to what I said as far as generally written comment will be due 4:30 p.m. on the Monday prior to a Wednesday board meeting. And then this is just us striking out their prescribed intent to speak card because we already have something similar in district that we use. So we don't really need to use the one that they're proposing. So I'll go ahead and stop share and allow the board to discuss, and Director Shield and Lynn, if they have anything to offer as well.
All right. Director Shields, Director Lynn, do you have anything else you want to add? No.
Yeah, I'll just say thanks for the opportunity to go through things. It is kind of difficult. I come from, a community orientation. I love public comments. I love public forums, and in the past I would be like, throw everything open. But of course you can't just do that. You do have to have some solid ground rules. And so I think we really just tried to balance that and really to just stay true to the meaning or the purpose of engaging with our community and stuff. We did have that point where we added being able to speak not only on current agenda items, but past agenda items. And I just wanted to do that to make sure that we weren't cutting people off unnecessarily if they weren't able to comment on a previous meeting's items. There was the things about there's no comment at work sessions, which I believe Director Shields and I just wanted to make sure that it is absolutely clear to the public and to the board members when things are scheduled as work sessions and when they're going to be scheduled as regular meetings. And so there is no switch where we tell people there's going to be public comment and then we say, oh, whoops, it's a work session, you don't get to comment. And then I really thought that it was necessary to put in the part about giving the chair discretion to set orders of comments. Obviously in the mindset that hopefully it would never need to be used. But if we did have a whole bunch of people come in, particularly if they were out of district, particularly if we had a large group of students signing up to comment, or if we had, a very specific issue that people had signed up to comment on at the same time as a bunch of people coming to comment on a general issue, we wanted to make sure that the board chair can make sure that those people, we can prioritize people in district, people speaking on the more specific issues. With the caveat, of course, that if there was a board chair who abused that discretion, we would obviously have to reopen the policy and change the policy back.
The only thing I would add to that is it doesn't talk to, which Director Lynn mentioned. We've had times when many people come to speak on the same exact topic. The board chair has met with that group of people. Let's say there's 10 or so that come to make the comments. The board chair has often gone and talked with those individuals and said, you have the same interest, pick a spokesperson and have 2 or 3 comments made. And so when it says the chair will have the discretion to determine the order of public comments, I think that was, part and parcel to the thought process as well, because you're trying to organize the amount of time that you have. So I'm not sure I'm married, it's just one of those, it's a procedural thing. And this is in our reg, it's the administrative reg. So that's procedural, and procedures can be changed by fairly easily, notwithstanding what our policy expert at OSBA had to say. And then Superintendent Owens, on the section in the administrative reg, the commendation, this is the indented section before procedures for written comment. The commendation involving a staff member should be sent to the superintendent, who will forward it to did we have a recommendation on that it would be all of those, the employee, a supervisor and the board. It had been one of those bracketed items that I think we kind of assumed, and I may be looking at a copy that's not correct. So I apologize.
You're right. It is a commendation involving a staff member should be sent to the superintendent, who will forward it to the employee, supervisor, and the board.
Okay.
That
So
way,
we're recommending all of them.
recommending also that the employee who's being commended gets the maximum amount of recognition.
Thank you.
The other thing I will say to Director Lynn's comment was, and I'm glad that he brought this up with respect to having both current and past agenda items that an individual can comment to. It provides some structure to what can be commented on. One thing that our policy expert recommended is that we consider putting some sort of a time parameter in terms of how far back an item can be commented on. Is this years? Is it 2 years? Is it, if it's ever been on a board meeting agenda in the history of Centennial? Like, what is that? So that's another element for the board's consideration. Again, our recommendation was to just have current and past and just kind of see how that goes. And if it's being utilized in a way that is contrary to kind of our intent, then we would revisit that, I think is my understanding of kind of where we might fall on that.
Awesome. Do we have any more discussion on this? Yes, Director Shields.
Since it's the first read, we'll really want the board to, consider those kinds of, items. But in that respect, when we were talking about past agenda items, and I don't know what was in the mind of David when he was, when we were, all kind of talking about it. But for me, it was like the previous board meeting. I wasn't thinking anything past like the previous board meeting. And until, you just brought it up, it's like, ooh, that could be clarified somehow a little better what the intent is, because otherwise, I think you're right. We could get inundated with that time back there whenever, and we don't have the time for that. Especially since our agendas are made public and people can make comment about things that they've been seeing. Just because they missed it the one time, great. Let them go back to that one agenda item, but not 3 months back or last year's.
Chair Solosky.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fuller. I do also agree with Director Shields that probably just like a 1 or 2 meeting parameter on that. And then I was curious if we could add language to that one saying, if needed, chair can prioritize the order of speakers. That kind of speaks to like, if it's just a few folks, it's not needed, there won't be anything. But if it is a larger number, I don't know if that's too vague to be included in the language, but that's my suggestion.
I like that. Superintendent Owens, how do you thoughts on
Yeah, let's talk about that for a moment, because I can see that. And I also wonder if the board chair just simply having discretion provides that flexibility to be able to exercise that discretion or not. So it could be duplicative to say if needed. But good point.
All right, so again, this is the first reading. So folks, please go back, take a look at this, really bring back to, and I believe you can talk to Director Lynn and Shields and Superintendent Owens as well too, about whatever what other ideas you have about this particular subject. And then next meeting, we will have, I believe, a second reading, right?
Yeah, and what I'm thinking is that maybe Director Shields, Director Lynn, and I just have an email chain where we interact on the particular customization around how far back a comment can go. And then I can provide in a regular update where we're headed on that, and then put that forward in for a second read or confirmation items, kind of depending on what sort of board engagement we get between now and the next meeting. But, as is our practice, let's work it until we get it right. If we need to bring this back for another read and make sure we process it again, we can do that. And, let's just kind of play it from there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all. We will go to 8 future agenda items, and I'll pass that on to Superintendent Owens.
So what I have for future agenda items, could be at next meeting, it could just be in the future, is indoor masks. We need to have that discussion. Board reserve fund. I know that there was more board engagement that was requested on that. We'll have the second read or in consent agenda for policy BDDH, which was just discussed here. And then we have the high school athletic stadium field and the RFP master plan for the athletic field for consideration. I don't know exactly when that's going to be ready. And I don't know if Director Southerton, I don't want to put you on the spot, but that was something that needs to come up again. And then there was also comment about having conversation around how we budget for deferred maintenance as well. And so I just wanted to offer those pieces as things that we're tracking.
Awesome.
All important topics. The RFP for the stadium field went live today. So it was published in the Gresham Outlook as well as on our website, and was sent out to numerous architects and designers of turf fields, as well as shared or is being shared with Field Turf and AstroTurf, which are the 2 leading providers of turf fields in the region. So while they would not respond to the RFP, we want to make sure that we do a wide reach and make sure we send it out to all potentially interested parties. They may respond, or it may be a provider. They won't be the architect or designer, which is what the RFP is for right now. But certainly they work with many, so we want everybody to be aware of that and have an opportunity to respond.
Awesome. And we have some board members to add to our future agenda items. Director Shields first.
Yeah, I'd like us to, this is a piggyback on the board, the boundary review. One of the things that comes up is that after every census, we have to look at our zoned districts. And so we have 3 zones, zone 1, 2, and 3, which will have to be now realigned based on what what we're doing, right, with the boundaries. And then we have the 4 at large. While we're doing that, I'd like to have a discussion about renumbering. It's never made any sense to me that position 1 is zone 1, position 2 is zone 2, but position 3 is at large. It's kind of like, wouldn't position 3 be like, zone 3? So if there's some way that we could maybe, work that out so that it would just kind of go 1, 2, 3, and then the rest of us, the at larges be, the rest of the positions. It makes sense for us to kind of do it all together while we're doing these boundary reviews. So, however, there is a process that we have to go through with Multnomah County. We did look into it in 2018, and they suggested, Multnomah County was the one that suggested wait until the census comes through. And then, of course, then we had our bond passing. So now we've got 2 things that make sense. Census, our boundary review, so that I think it would make more sense to our public if we were zones 1, 2, and 3, positions 1, 2, and 3. So that's it.
Thank you. Chair Solosky.
Thank you, Vice Chair Fuller. My question pertains, excuse me, I guess I'm looking at an outdated agenda, but I thought that we were going to be also talking about Care Solace. And so is that something that will be in a future agenda?
That was on.
That should be the consent under consent agenda. There's no consent agenda tonight.
We approved.
Perfect. Never mind.
Awesome. Director Lynn.
Yeah, just also with the redistricting, I'd love to hear about safe routes to school and how we're always talking about how we can coordinate with other city and county government agencies to get things, to do things better. And now with the redistricting, it would be great to see how we can coordinate getting better sidewalks on the main routes to the schools so that kids aren't walking in the streets. Community engagement, our district spans, cities, counties, and so many communities. It'd be really great to re-coordinate and really get reconnected with the neighborhood associations and stuff in those neighborhoods. And that, of course, means I'd love to hear an update about our houseless community and students. And then I don't know if it's just late and maybe I'm getting old. Is there still any discussion about the quality of turf fields? And because I would just like to hear about that in the proposals. If there's any differentiation, or if they're all great nowadays and none of them break down into little rubber pellets, or maybe I'm thinking way too old here, but I just want to make sure that it's super safe. It doesn't just break down in a few years, and it's good for our athletes.
Thank you. Superintendent Owens, did you want to respond to that? I don't know if you know that, what Director Lynn was.
Yeah, what I would say, safe routes to school. In fact, we've had a couple of engagements with them in the last week and a half. And what I can say is they're looking at the potential of putting some sidewalk on 174th where Pal Butte and the high school are. Don't want to get too far ahead with getting too excited because we've kind of heard some of that talk before and it hasn't materialized, but hopefully. And then they also want to put sidewalk on the back end of Centennial Middle School out in the neighborhood. There's a stretch between the middle school and the high school where kids walk in the street between that section. They want to put some sidewalk there as well. So we have a meeting. In fact, Board Secretary Jordan is scheduling some time with Director Southerton, Safety and Security Lead Pete Jetter, and myself to meet with Safe Routes here in the next couple of weeks to talk about those projects further. And I can provide information, at least in the weekly updates that I provide, if not a board presentation, if that's requested. And as far as the turf quality, I'll defer to Director Southerton.
Thank you, Superintendent Owens. That will absolutely be a part of what we look at is longevity, maintenance, upkeep, safety for our student athletes, and overall just requirements of the district. So Field Turf and AstroTurf are the two leading manufacturers and installers of turfs, and they're both recommended highly by our athletics community. In fact, we heard from them today regarding Field Turf in particular. And so we will be looking at that and making sure that's a part of anything that's installed, that it's of good quality for the district and good value for the district.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and that's awesome to hear about behind the middle school, because that's where I pick up my kid every day, and we're constantly swerving as kids are walking in, wherever they have to get through. So thanks.
Awesome. Director Andrews.
In connection with the board zone discussion, and if other members of the board don't want to talk about this, that's okay. But I have often wondered why there are 7 board members for Centennial School District. I know Gresham Barlow has 5. I think PPS has 5 too. And wondering if there is a sweet spot, or what's sort of average, and why we seem to have 7. So if we talk about rezoning and how many at-large versus zone positions we have, it might be interesting to have at least a brief discussion of how many board members we actually need to have. I know many of our races are uncontested, and I know from time to time it's been hard to even fill board positions. Not currently, but sometimes it is, and perhaps if there were fewer board, but we could also talk about having more board positions too, if that was something that was of interest. So anyway.
Awesome.
And if it's of interest, we can potentially reach out to OSBA and see if they can give us any sort of information as far as how that's determined.
Yeah, I think that would be a good like research to figure out that. Is there any more questions or additions to the future agenda items? All right, with that being said, is there a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
I'm like, we can stay here all night if we want to. Okay, so motion to adjourn the meeting by Director Andrews. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Director Lynn. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. That is unanimous, and everyone have a good night.
Bye, everybody.
Congratulations, Chair Slawski. Look forward to working with you.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Same.
Good night.